Okay, so I have had a few things going on in my head and on my heart for quite a while now. And so I thought I'd try and throw my bit into the pot. For those who are aware of the Enneagram, I'm a number 7, so I'm all about joy. So I've decided to call my little bit A Quest for Joy and Living Lighter. So I was thinking about how depressing things are quite often in the news, and there's loads of stuff to get us down. So I wanted to try and have a little injection of joy and try to think about how to live freer and how to live lighter. And so in thinking about this, I was reminded of the verse that Anth talked about quite a lot, which says, the version I remember is, everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial, I think is how I'd remembered it. When I looked it up in the NIV, it was slightly different. But essentially, we are free. We are free to do what we want. But some of those choices ultimately are going to limit our freedom. If I go and shoot someone, I will literally lose my freedom and probably end up in prison. But there's lots of things that we can choose that are maybe more subtle than that end up sort of limiting our freedom, weighing us down. We carry all this stuff around with us sometimes, don't we? And I was thinking about, I think Joel's talked about it before, and then Danny mentioned it again about should. And all the time I had this thing in my head like, let's just replace the word should I do this thing with, is this thing going to be beneficial either for me or for the people around me? Is it constructive? And can we kind of keep that in mind as a measure for our choices and the way we're living our lives to try to bring about more freedom and more joy? So, yes, I remember what else I was going to say on this. When I mentioned it to Kev, he was like, yeah, but have you read the whole verse? You should read it in context. I was like, no, of course I haven't read the whole verse. I take the bits that I like and I run with them. But he was like, you do know it's about sexual immorality, don't you? And I was like, is it? Okay, I'll go back and read it. And yes, one of the things I think it's sort of saying is we should not commit sexual immorality. But it also says you shouldn't grumble. So, maybe we're not guilty of the first, but actually there's a other end of the spectrum, isn't there, where it's talking about things that are not beneficial. And can anybody honestly put their hand up and say they never grumble? Okay, so the first thing maybe to have a little bit of a think about is the things in your life maybe that are permissible. You know, we can do it. It's not against the law perhaps, but maybe aren't totally beneficial or constructive. I'll open it up to discussion, but I am also aware that some people cringe at the thought of having to talk. So there is this table that is free, handily, that has got some post-it notes and pens on. If you're more of an internal processor and you'd rather just go and have a think about it yourself, maybe write yourself some notes, and you don't want to take part in a discussion and are brave enough to actually get up out of your seat and go and sit at that table now and admit that is there for you. So we'll just take a little bit of time now to think about that question. Like, what are the things that are permissible but might not be beneficial, and what does that look like in your lives? I feel like we've exhausted that and that most people had quite a few examples. I think there was a lot of talk around food, which is interesting. Probably going to touch on that again a bit later. But it's interesting, isn't it? I think lots of people were saying that the circumstances do matter and that it's not one size fits all and it's not one moment fits all. You know, we were saying about sometimes you just really need a chocolate biscuit, and you know what, that is the thing you need in that moment. Obviously eating them all the time, probably not that beneficial. Anyway, so there was another thing sort of on this topic that I hope you see fits in with it, that I think is a big thing that can weigh us down. And apparently there's a saying that I hadn't heard of, but it came in this newsletter, that comparison is the thief of joy. So it's like, right, if my quest is for joy, then we need to have a look at comparisons. And And it got me thinking about another bit of the Bible that I've sort of remembered a little bit of and not really the whole context of, which is also in Corinthians. Apparently, I just love Corinthians. I didn't know I did until I found out where it was. But it talks about as if we're the body of the Christ, body of Christ. And it was saying, if the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? And it's, I think, thinking about we are part of a bigger picture and we're each unique and we have our own unique thing to bring. And so comparing ourselves to another person, thinking, oh, well, they're just doing so much better at that thing, or, who am I? What have I got to bring? And it's just not helpful because we're not meant to be like that person. We are us. And if we can concentrate on us and bring in our bit of that, then the whole body kind of functions better and is doing what it's meant to do. So whether that's kind of in the whole context of your life or here at church or at work or wherever really, and if we can get to this point where we're saying, if one part suffers, every part suffers with it, and if one part is honoured, every part rejoices with it, and it's lovely. And I think that there is a lot of that coming through in kind of definitely on social media. There's a post meme, I guess you'd call it, that I've included here that I really like the thought of. It said we should be lifting each other up and cheering each other on, not trying to outshine one another. The sky would be awfully dark with just one star. And it's kind of this thought that it's a whole sky, isn't it? And we're all stars in that. And it doesn't matter who's shining brightest, you just bring your bit. And I think if you're getting into comparison, it can make you really competitive, can't it? And feel like you've got to push others down. And who actually feels good if they're in that mindset? That absolutely robs your joy. If you can rejoice at every single other person's stuff that's going well for them, that's going to give you more joy if we're operating as one. And another analogy I was thinking about was an orchestra playing a symphony. There's so many different parts in that. Whether you're kind of the big loud cymbal crash that just happens once in the song, but it's like the crowning glory. Phil Craven's not here, sadly. I was thinking about him in that moment. Or whether you're just part of a whole group of violins that are just constantly playing the melody throughout and kind of keeping things going. Each part has its place in that piece of music. Now, I'm not a lover of classical music, I'll be honest. And so I was going through lots and lots of them because I thought I really want to play a little piece just to hammer home the idea of a whole part, a whole symphony, and just to see which instrument you kind of identify with most. What's your favourite? So I was going through loads of them, and then I came across The Planets by, is it Gustav Holst? I'm not very cultured, I don't know if I've pronounced that right, but there is one that is Jupiter, and the kind of subtitle of that is The Bringer of Jollity. And I was like, well, there we go, that's the piece for this morning, isn't it? As I've said, all about joy. I think it's about 9 minutes long, something like that, so I've edited it down, but we will enjoy a couple of minutes now. After Kev talked about how music can manipulate you, I'm hoping to manipulate you this morning and lift your mood a little bit with this very rousing piece of classical music. So we'll just have a look at that for 2 minutes. It's amazing, isn't it? Watching, I'm like, even if you're not into classical music, that is really quite something, isn't it? Watching that. I like the little oboe man. He features earlier on as well. Yeah, but I think if we went around, I won't for time, but I think if we went around, we probably all have a different favourite instrument, and different instruments will speak to different people. And that's the same in life, isn't it? I think that's why at Q we're trying to let lots of people have a voice, because you can speak to different people in different ways. Okay, let me think where I was going after that. Oh yeah, so the point that I was going to make was if any of those instruments had played that piece by themselves, the impact would have not been the same at all, would it? I mean, there's some instruments that just don't play for a section of the song, and I think that's another thing. There's timing in it, isn't there? And if we're all playing our part and bringing what we can at the time that we can bring it, hopefully we can fill in for one another when we're needing a bit of rest or we're needing to step back. And as a kind of whole, creating the symphony all together, we make a much more beautiful sound. But then the more I thought about it, I thought, but are all comparisons bad? Is it always bad to be making comparisons? And I was thinking, no, because actually, how do you measure progress? How do you see if you're changing? You need to be able to compare yourself to how you were before. And actually comparing yourself and seeing that somebody is better at something isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's what you do with that. And it's actually only when you make a judgment, when you've looked at that comparison and you start to assign value and you think, oh, I'm less of a person or I'm a better person than that person because of this comparison, that it really starts to become a problem. So I was thinking back to Ted Lasso and his be curious, not judgmental. What happens if when we make a comparison and we see a difference, we're curious about that instead of automatically judging the value of that thing, and we go and speak to that person and we say, oh, you're so good at this, Clare. I so admire. How are you running a business, doing this stuff at church? You've got your kids, and she just seems to breeze through it and be doing amazing. And actually, when the kids were younger, I remember having a conversation with her and she was like, do you know what? I just ask for help. Like, a random stranger, can you help me get my kid on the train, please? And that really stuck with me. And it's helped me to think, yeah, do you know what? I don't have to do it all myself. And that's how you can be a better parent, businesswoman, all the rest of it. So you either learn something from that person and you can kind of become more yourself, or they let you behind the mask, like when Danny was talking about the imposter syndrome, how we all have an external presentation and that's all that you're seeing. You don't get to see what's going on internally in their home, in their mind. And if you're curious and you're willing to be open and vulnerable and to speak to that person, they might let you see behind that. And she might say, oh, you should see my hall. My daughter's bedroom looks amazing, but the hall. and then it levels you, doesn't it? And you think, oh, we're all in this together. We've all got our good parts and our bad parts. And I don't have to sit here thinking, oh, woe is me, I'm a rubbish person because everybody else is doing a much better job. If we get curious, we can actually learn something, and it helps growth, doesn't it? The other thing that sort of came to mind as I was going to use the word percolating. Kev was like, was that a word that you would normally use? And I was like, I think it's quite fitting. It's been percolating. I've been reading this book. It's on parenting, actually, by a guy called Gabor Mate. Is that how you pronounce it? And he talks about just because something is normal doesn't mean that it's natural or healthy. I'll say that again because I feel like it took me a while to get a hold of. Just because it's normal doesn't mean it's natural or healthy. So thinking about the food, as we were talking earlier, in our office we love cake. We have a lot of biscuits, we have a lot of cake. It's really normal for everyone to have a biscuit and a bit of cake when they're having a cup of tea. For me, at the moment, I'm really trying to not put on any more weight because it's been creeping up. For me, it's natural and healthy for me to say no to that cake. And actually, other people in my office are maybe doing way more exercise than I am. And so to judge and compare myself to others in that situation isn't helpful at all. You've got to have the sort of strength of conviction to, again, going back to what we were saying at the beginning, think about, is this beneficial? Is this constructive for me? Not comparing myself to other people and thinking, well, if everyone else is doing it, it can't be that bad. And I thought that was something to keep hold of, wasn't it? And as a measure, because actually these are the things that are going to weigh us down if we're not paying attention to them. If we're just going with the flow, we're not honouring ourselves and what we need for ourselves. So that's what I was thinking on the comparison front. The next little section to sort of finish things off came out of a programme that I was watching on the BBC. I think it's called The Pilgrimage. There's 3 series, but it was the North Wales one that I watched, and a group of celebrities, I think over 2 weeks, walk along this pilgrim's way in North Wales, and they're all from different faith backgrounds and all sorts. It's a really beautiful series, actually. I really enjoyed watching it, and it helped me to kind of evaluate my faith and what I think and what I believe now. But there was one particular part of it at the end where they go to this little church, and the vicar there tells them about a tradition where you can pick a stone from the beach, and you write on that stone something that you want to let go of. So for a lot of them, they were suffering with grief or loss of a loved one. It was a memory or a prayer. And then they'd put it all on this cairn. Is it cairn? Is that how you pronounce it? The vicar would bless it, and then they'd release these stones back into the sea as a real kind of symbol and ritual of letting go of something. And so I'll play the clip in a minute and you can see it. I found it really moving. And in editing it, I was still sat there crying, and Jacob's like, "Mummy, why are you crying?" I'm like, "It's just so beautiful." So unfortunately, our church isn't right by the sea, and we don't have a cairn, but I've tried, hopefully, to recreate a bit of that this morning, and I did think maybe we could collect them and take them to Saltburn and actually release these stones into the sea. So we'll play the clip, but if you can be thinking about what it is maybe that you'd like to let go of, maybe the comparisons thing has spoken to you and you want to let go of unhealthy comparisons. When Kev talked about pointing and calling, notice when you're about to make a comparison, is it becoming unhealthy? Are we making a judgment there, or can we be more curious? Or perhaps it's something else. Perhaps some of the stuff in the video will speak to you, but if you have a think about it, and then we'll try and write on these stones with these pens. I'm not sure how well that's going to work, but we'll see. Let's have a look at this video first.
Hi, it's Kev. Sorry to interrupt your podcast listening for this week, but unfortunately we were unable to put any clips from Pilgrimage into this podcast. So if you do want to watch that, you need to head to BBC iPlayer, search for Pilgrimage. It's episode 3, The Road Through North Wales, and we'll add a link to it as well in the blog. So now let's go back to Kelly from Sunday morning.
So they've obviously been on a journey there, getting to that point, and I know that I've witted on for about half an hour at you now and asking you to come to that same point in thinking of something that you might want to write on a stone to let go of. So if you're not there and nothing's coming to you and you want to take a stone away with you, it's absolutely fine. Maybe you want to think on it more. Like I said, I'd really like to take these stones to Saltburn and to let them go. And maybe we'll take some of the pens with us so that you can actually find a lovely beach stone that's much smoother and easier to write on. But we will just have a little bit of time now so that if there is anything that has come up for you this morning, you can write it on the stone. And then we've created a very sad looking cairn over on that silver table. There's a little pile of rocks. And if you want to add yours to that pile, we'll bless them in some way, shape or form, collect them, and we'll take them with us to Saltburn to release back into the sea. So we'll just have a few minutes to think through that, and then I think Claire's going to come and wrap up for us. Right. We're just going to come to an end to that bit now. And I'm just going to share a few thoughts that I've had on what Kelly's been discussing this morning. And I've been in talks with her all week about this, and I found it really moving. I watched the episode of The Pilgrimage that she shared, and it was really moving episode. And I looked into pilgrimage and what that means, and it says it's a devotional practice consisting of a prolonged journey toward a destination of significance. It is an inherently transient experience, removing the participant from his or her home environment
an identity, and it's often used to describe an individual's journey through life. And I liked that analogy of the home environment, because what's home is what can feel comfortable to you, or what might be loving for you, that actually sometimes you might have to move away from and let go of. And in our identity, so much of what Q and the Rock Church has been challenging our identity and what it is that we form to make a part of who we are, and questioning things and being curious in order to grow. And in a lot of ways, we are coming to an end of that part of our pilgrimage with the end of QChurch, and coming to a significant point in our journey through life and beginning our new pilgrimage with the Forum. QChurch is ending, and endings can feel so finite and hard, but really they're not. It's a natural progression, the rhythm and pattern of life. I've been watching this series on iPlayer called Sort Your Life Out, and it's with Stacey Solomon, who I'm a big fan of. And I've been watching a couple of episodes this week, and what she does is her and her team go to someone's house who've got quite overwhelmed, and it's become really hoarded, and they've collected and gathered things. And often when you get to the root of it, it's because something happened to them in their life that's meant that they've lost their focus on their home life, and things have just got on top of them and quite overwhelming. And what they do is they take every single item out of their house and they put it in a warehouse. And then they go into this warehouse and it's literally full of all their stuff. It's incredible how much stuff these people have. And I often watch, I think, I don't know what my house would look like, to be fair. But the point I'm trying to make from that is when Stacey gets with people to help them throw their things out, and they have to get rid of over 50% often of what they've got, there's so much that actually they've really struggled to get rid of, because they've become so connected to it somehow in their memories and in their life experience. And there was one woman who was holding on to some stuff from her former marriage, and her partner had left and they'd separated, and she'd obviously found that very difficult. And now they'd moved on and stuff. It came to her wedding album, and there was stuff from their proposal and stuff, and it was just making her cry. And Stacey said to her, "But this makes you sad. Do you need to keep hold of this? I understand that it was a point of your life at the time that was significant, but it's actually making you sad. Do you need to bring that into your new home that we're creating for you, or is it time to maybe let that go?" And it got me thinking about, there's a lady called Marie Kondo who does this, I don't know if I should pronounce her name right, but she's quite famous for doing this type of sort your life out thing as well, in terms of she's got this method on how you declutter. And if you remember when I talked about endings, I talked about how we can hoard things in our mind and our memories and our emotions that actually are cluttering. And what she was saying with decluttering the physical things is asking yourself, does it spark joy? And in light of what Kelly's been saying this morning about joy, I thought that was really interesting, that you have to look at it and say, does it bring me joy? Does it make me feel good? Or does it make me sad? And I had my own experience in this, where there was a particular item of clothing that I had that I'd worn the night my brother had passed, and I found it really hard to get rid of it. But it did nothing for me other than make me feel sad. And what she says you should do is when it's a particularly difficult thing, and Stacey Solomon did this as well, is that you thank it and you say thank you, and then you put it in the bag and you get rid. And I thought, again, there was something really powerful in that sometimes with what you're writing on your stones and what we're moving through into the Forum, sometimes it's good to say some things need to be left, and to say, if that's something that's hard for you to let go of, to say, but I thank you for what that did for me then, but it's time for that to go and leave it behind. And actually there can be a lightness in that, and it can spark more joy in you. And the guy in the clip that particularly caught me was the guy who talked about his mum passing away and having a heavy heart. Because that's the thing, we can hold on to certain things that can bring a heaviness to our energy. And it's about lifting that away. They were putting down that they loved as well. Didn't you find that interesting? Sometimes it's easy to get away, to get rid of something that's causing you pain, or it's bitter, or bitterness, or something that's I don't know, not feeling so good, but actually something that they loved, they were actually having to physically put down and walk away from in that symbolism. And the act of saying thank you and goodbye. But if a memory or a comparison becomes a problem, and we take action to defend and protect it, or even self-sabotage, that's what we can do with these things, isn't it? Is almost have them as a form of making ourselves feel bad because we don't want to detach. And the important way to handle comparisons and these things and these memories is to notice, observe, and evaluate. Balancing your own judgment is important, and thinking critically is an amazing gift where we can observe and evaluate. And as Kelly had said earlier, judgment is a really important part of being human, about growing a broad and deeper perspective in order to be able to make comparisons and observe and evaluate and reason and discern. Come, let us reason together. And as long as our motivation is to better understand others and better serve our communities, including ourselves, then comparisons can be healthy. Our memories can be healthy, as it can lead us to gratitude. And that's what I was thinking about with the letting go and the sorting your life out stuff. It's about being grateful as well for what you do have, and finding that place of self-acceptance where you're able to want growth without feeling the lack. But it has to be compassion-led. Compassion to your real self, because often it's about your idealized self versus your real self, uncovering what's there and observing your feelings as opposed to what you see. And it reminded me of what Chris brought all those years ago when it comes to joy, to mind the gap. Mind the gap. The key to joy is minding the gap. The gap between your realized self and the internal reality of who you really are and your idealized self. And the gap is gratitude, attitude, and perspective. Gratitude for what you have. Gratitude for what you've had in your life, and gratefulness and thanking it and letting it go and those things, and actually observing what it is you do have instead of worrying about what others have. That then change your attitude. And actually this is where we trip up when it comes to changing our behaviour. That's where we can trip up, because we don't want to, because that's actually the hard bit. The hard bit is actually saying, I need to change my attitude here, or I need to slightly change my behaviour and how I move forward. And that's what will bring you the new perspective that will give you your joy. So as we close our doors to QChurch, we now would like to invite you to place your stones on the table, or we can collect them at the end, as the end of this part of life's pilgrimage. But it has to go beyond the symbolism of two. It has to go beyond just the symbolism of this. It has to be about your attitude as well, and your new perspective. Because joy comes in the morning, in the letting go and the seeing what we have to be grateful for, where our attitude can now change and a new perspective can be gained. Because after all, we are living stones, and the pilgrimage in the story continues through us as we enter our new beginning and the forum. So I hope you've all enjoyed this morning. I think big congrats to Kelly. That was really great to put yourself out there.